Hey guys, what's up? Welcome or welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Zoe and I'm so happy that you clicked on today's video. Welcome back. This is going to be the last video as far as my 2023 reading wrap-up type of videos go. This is the big one that we've all been waiting for. Probably nobody's been waiting for it, but I've been excited about it. I've just kind of been avoiding it because it takes a lot to get this video prepped and to put everything away, because today I'm going to be going through every single book that I read in 2023 and telling you whether I would recommend you read it or not. We're gonna try to go through this as quickly as possible. I don't want this to take an hour, but in 2023 I read 113 books. I have all of the ones that I physically own here. I'll put the others on the screen, and I'm literally just going to show it to you, maybe say what I rated it. I don't know, because my ratings change all the time, and say if I recommend it or not. And it's gonna be super fun and a cute way to kind of just go through all the books that I read last year and kind of get nostalgic for me. So with that being said, let's get right into this because I fear how long it's gonna take. So we're just gonna go month by month. So let's start with January. In January, I started the year off with quite the perfect read. I read Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino. This is one of my favorite books ever, hands down 5 stars. Yes, I would recommend it. Then we moved on to The First to Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This is the prequel to They Both Die at the End, and this is another one that was a favorite of the year for me. I rated this one 5 stars. I would also recommend it. Moving along with such a strong start to January, I read A History of Wild Places by Shea Ernshaw. This one was really out of my comfort zone, not the type of thing I would normally read, but I loved it so much. Rated this one 5 stars as well. I know 3 5 stars to start the year off is kind of crazy, but yes, I would recommend it. Then I moved on to The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This one I feel like is very overhyped. I personally didn't enjoy it that much, and I think there are other books that can give you the same thing but in a better way, so I would not necessarily recommend this unless you're really wanting to read those popular book talk books. Then I read Nothing More to Tell by Karen M. McManus. This is the author of One of Us is Lying, and I personally love her books. I think they're such fun YA mystery thrillers, and I had a good time with this one, so I would recommend it. Then I moved on to such an amazing duology. I read Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. This one was amazing. I would absolutely recommend it, especially if you're new to fantasy, which I was at the time. I feel like it was such a good way to get into the genre and kind of just introduce myself. And then I read Vow of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson, and this one was even better. So yes, I would 100% recommend both of those. I love them so much. Then in January, I continued my Harry Potter reading journey by reading Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. This was not my favorite one I've read so far, but I did still really enjoy it. And of course, you can't really go wrong with Harry Potter, so I would recommend it. And then the last book I read in January was Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. I thought this was incredible. I thought it was really amazing to hear about his life, even though it was really hard to hear at times. I would absolutely recommend it, especially now. If you're any type of fan of his, I would say definitely go read it. Now we move on to February. February was such a fun reading month. I tried to read all the romances and everything for Valentine's Day, and the first one I read in the month was an ARC, and it ended up being my favorite book of the year, one of my favorite books of all time. We have Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. Literally the sweatshirt I'm wearing is Practice Makes Perfect. Thank you to my bestie Bethany for sending it to me, but like, there is no book that I could recommend more than this one other than Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. So if you know me, you would know I recommend this. I love it with my whole entire body, soul, heart, everything. Then I moved on to The Heartstopper Yearbook by Alice Oseman. This was just a fun, cute little way to kind of learn more about the Heartstopper characters, the universe, kind of get a little bit more of those mini comics and just see like the past for Nick and Charlie and their friends. I thought it was really cute, but nothing like super amazing. But if you really love Heartstopper, I would recommend it. Otherwise, I would probably say just skip it. Then I read another one of my favorite books of the year. This was in my top 3. I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I know I was incredibly behind on this train and reading Taylor Jenkins Reid books, but I could not recommend this book enough. I absolutely loved it, think about it all the time, and I want to reread it soon because I miss it so much. Then to continue with that kind of like love, romance kind of theme, I read Loveless by Alice Oseman. This is one that I had been avoiding for a long time because I was afraid of it, but I loved it so much. It was 5 stars. I would absolutely recommend it, especially because this was just a very different type of story. It had really good representation for many different things, as Alice Oseman tends to do. I would recommend it, yes. Then I read Five Survive by Holly Jackson. This is the author of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which I love, but honestly, this one kind of fell flat for me. I would say if you're somebody who doesn't read that many mystery thrillers, go for it, you'll probably love it. But if you are a bigger reader of that genre, maybe not your thing. Then after putting it off for years, I read Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, and I honestly loved this so much. I ate it up. I would definitely recommend it. I thought it was just so cute. The banter was so witty and fun. I loved our characters. It was just a really great story. Then on the opposite side of that spectrum, I read Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman, and I would honestly not recommend this one. I felt like I just couldn't connect to the characters, and I didn't care about anything that much, so this would be a no from me. Then I read My Phony Valentine by Courtney Walsh. This one was a hockey romance set around Valentine's Day, and it was so cute. I would definitely recommend, especially if you're looking for a little seasonal romance for February. And then I read The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. As much as I absolutely adore Abby Jimenez and I am such an avid fan of her, I would not recommend this book. There was just a lot of it that I had issues with that made me really upset. This is her only book that I would say no to. But then I moved into the Happy Ever After playlist by Abby Jimenez, and this one was 1,000 times better. Loved it so much. As I tend to be with her books, I would recommend it. It just made me really happy. Then I read an arc. I read Begin Again by Emma Lord. This is the same author of Tweet Cute, which going into this, I had kind of like nervous, hesitant expectations, if that makes sense, because I did not really like Tweet Cute, and the same rang true for Begin Again. I just didn't really like it. I wouldn't really recommend it. Unless you're like a younger teen, then it might be your thing. Next, I started a trilogy that I had been wanting to read for ages. I read A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, and this one, I will say, of the trilogy was my favorite. I would recommend it if you really like fantasy. Just know that the writing is a lot slower. It's not super easy to fly through, so it might not be your thing. It wasn't really mine. But if you do like fantasy or V.E. Schwab, I would say give it a shot because the story is really, really neat. Then I read The Proposal by Jasmine Guillory, and all I can say for this one is I do not recommend it, unfortunately. Moving on, I read a Heartstopper novella. I read Nick and Charlie. This one I had been really wanting to get to because obviously that sound on TikTok went really viral at one point last year of like talking about all the different things that Nick loves, or Charlie loves, Nick loves. And I really wanted to read this, and it finally came out in the US, so I had to get it and read it, and I loved it. As always, I would recommend all things Heartstopper. And then I ended my February with none other than Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Again, such a huge hit for me, 5 stars hands down. I would recommend this. Taylor Jenkins Reid is just something else. Like, her writing is so good. I loved it. Then moving on to March, I started my month with yet another arc. I read Just My Type by Fallon Ballard, and this one was such a cute enemies to lovers kind of workplace romance. I had a lot of fun with it. I would recommend it if you're a big romance girly. And then I read another arc, kind of a theme at this point in the year. I read Take a Bow, Noah Mitchell by Tobias Madden. This one was really cute. It was definitely different. It was about 2 boys who were in theater and they fall in love, and it was kind of like a one of them knew who he was, the other one didn't. It was like an online thing. It was cute. I would recommend it if you're into like YA romances, but it was definitely nothing that I'm going to remember forever. Then I read The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. I was so excited for this because I loved In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, but this one just didn't really do it for me. I had really mixed feelings about it. I would probably not recommend this one. And then I continued the Darker Shade of Magic series by reading A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. This one was not my thing. I really did not like this one. I really struggled to get through it. So personally, I would not recommend it, but I know this is a really popular series, so I'm kind of in the minority for not liking it, so take my word with a grain of salt. Then I went on a little romance kick. I read Maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover. I thought this story was really different and fun. I did really enjoy it as far as Colleen Hoover books go, and I would recommend it if you like her. But you know, some people definitely don't, so then I guess I wouldn't recommend it to you. Then I moved on to I Can Fix That by Juliana Smith. It is a closed-door romance with a carpenter and a teacher, and it is just so freaking cute. I love Juliana Smith's writing, and this one did not disappoint. I would recommend. And then I read The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This one, as much as I thought I would like it, I just didn't. I do love bodyguard romances, and I love the setting of this one, but it was not my favorite. I would not recommend that one, despite how popular it is. But then I moved on to another really cute one. I read Per My Last Email by Juliana Smith, and I adored this one. It was so cute. It was a workplace romance, which I feel like can be very hit or miss for me, but I did really like this one. In true Juliana Smith style. It was just super cute and heartwarming, and I loved it. And it was also the first book in a series, which was very exciting, so I would recommend that one. Then I started another series, which I am so excited about because the third one just came out. I actually just bought it today, and I cannot wait to read it. We have Defy the Night by Brigid Kemmerer. This one was so much fun. I got it recommended to me by my friend Allie and Bethany. They both loved it, and I also felt that same way. I adore this series, and this book was the best one by far, in my opinion, out of the two that I've read, so I would recommend it. And then I ended the month by reading Maybe Now by Colleen Hoover, which is the sequel to the Maybe Someday book, and it was a lot of fun. It was a cute ending. Again, if you like Colleen Hoover, I would recommend it, but if you don't, obviously I would not. And then we move on to April. April I had a lot of fun with reading. I definitely read way more books in the beginning of the year than I did in the end, because I had so much more free time earlier on in the year. But I started April with Maybe Not by Colleen Hoover, which is the little novella that goes in between Maybe Someday and Maybe Now. This one I personally honestly would not recommend, even if you do like Colleen Hoover. It was very short, and because it's a novella, obviously, but it was just allspice, and I feel like it just left you wanting more about like the emotional depth and the connection of the characters. Like, if I'm gonna get a novella, I want more story to it and less of the physical aspect of it, because it just felt like kind of pointless, so I would not recommend it. Then I moved on to The Soulmate by Sally Hepworth. This was my first Sally Hepworth book. She is a mystery thriller author, and I was so blown away by this one. I still think about it all these months later, and I would absolutely recommend that one. And then I continued the Defy the Night series by reading Defend the Dawn. This was the second one, and the one that I have been left with ever since. As I said, I just got the third one, so I've been waiting on this cliffhanger for so long. This one was also so good. Definitely, I would say not as good as Defy the Night, but it was amazing. Also, the covers for this series are just beautiful, and I would recommend that one because I, again, recommend that series hands down. Then I moved on to Starling by Kirsten Cram. This was one of my 12 books from 12 Book Besties book for the year. This one read very much kind of like a classic. It really felt like I was reading like To Kill a Mockingbird or something. It was just more like old-fashioned kind of, and I did really enjoy this. I thought it was a beautiful story, but I think as time has gone on, I like it less than I did right off the bat, which tends to happen. I did originally rate this one 5 stars. Now it would probably be like a 3, but I would still recommend it, especially if you like classics, because it did have that very much like classic storytelling vibe. Then I moved on to a book that I had been highly anticipating for 2023. I read How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This one was so much fun. It had haunted houses, it had puppets, it had all the creepy horror stuff that Grady Hendrix has, along with his comedic aspect of his books. I loved this one. I would absolutely recommend it. Then I moved on to some books that I read for a romance reading vlog. The first one being The Reunion by Kayla Olson. This one was a book of the month pick, but I honestly was not really wowed by it. I felt like it was really boring and it just felt really long, so I would not recommend that one. But this next book, I absolutely would. I read Call It What You Want by Brigid Kemmerer. Brigid Kemmerer was a new author for me in 2023, and I have completely fallen in love with her. This was a very emotional YA romance, and I devoured it. And then continuing on with that reading vlog, I read none other than Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. This one took a while for me. I started it, put it down for like a couple months, and then finished it in April. And I have to say, by the end, I was totally pulled into the story, very much sold, and I did love it. I still need to finish the series. But this one I really did enjoy. If you're into like the Gossip Girl, like toxic relationship, high society London, that type of thing, I would recommend. Then I read Ghost by Dolly Alderton. I was really excited about this one because I loved Everything I Know About Love, and I was really intrigued by her writing a fiction book, and this one was so good. It was really heartbreaking at times, like the romance. It was very realistic, real life for a woman in her 30s. Not that I can relate, I'm not a woman in my 30s, but I can understand that it was very heartbreaking and very hard to get through at times, but I did really like it. I would recommend that one. And then the other book that I read in April was, again, one of my favorite books of the year in my top 3. I read Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, and oh my goodness, I could not recommend this book enough. It is my favorite Abby Jimenez book for good reason. Such good mental health rep, such a beautiful relationship. The love in this book is told in such a special way, and I tell everyone I know to read it, so yeah. Then we move on to May. The first book I read was A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. Have to be so honest, this book is so popular. I'd wanted to read it for such a long time and I was so let down. I would honestly not recommend this one. It just did not hit the mark. I feel like there were a lot of loose ends. That one was definitely a fail for me. Then I read a book that my friend Bethany recommended to me. I read Dream On by Angie Hockman. I think this one is definitely one that I would recommend because it's very unique as far as romances go. It is closed door and basically it's about this woman who, I think she's in a coma. While she's in it, she dreams up that she has this boyfriend, wakes up, tells everyone about him, and they're like, this guy doesn't exist. Until she finds out that he actually does, which is kind of wild. And it's just a very unique story for romances, and I really love the setting. It's at like a flower shop set in the summer, super cute. Then I read another one of my most highly anticipated releases of the year. I read The Angel Maker by Alex North. He is one of my favorite authors. I love his books, but this one did not work for me because it made me feel dumb. I just felt very confused the entire time, and honestly, if you ask me now what it was about, I don't even know what happened in it. Like, I was just very lost the whole time. So that one, unfortunately, is not one that I would recommend to you, but this next one, I would. I reread When in Rome by Sarah Adams. If you know me, you know I love Sarah Adams. I had read Practice Makes Perfect earlier in the year, and I reread this in anticipation for the actual release of Practice Makes Perfect, and this was honestly even sweeter the second time around. I would recommend it, it's just so cute. And then I read one of everybody's most highly anticipated books of 2023, I think. I read Happy Place by Emily Henry. Loved it. It made me feel so many things. I loved the friendship aspect of it. Absolutely would recommend. Then a book I would not recommend, I read Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. This was fun because it had like an SNL aspect to it, but I felt very bored by the romance. It was about COVID, which just made me feel, ew, I don't want to relive that. Would not recommend. And then I read another favorite book of the year. I read Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. Buddy read this with my bestie Lucy and just had the best time. Now it's one of my favorite books. I adore Macy and Elliot with my entire heart. Next, I began a very fun time of the year. I entered my Shatter Me era with Shatter Me. This was actually my second time reading the book, and I enjoyed it just as much the second time around. I know a lot of people don't like the first one, but I personally do. Would recommend. And then I read the first novella, Destroy Me. I feel like I would just recommend all the novellas because it really gives you a better look into the characters' heads. And then I read another one of my favorite books of the year. I read Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. This was such a beautiful story. There's a Hulu series to watch after if you want to. I could not recommend this book enough, but I can't go on forever, so I'm not going to tell you about it, but I would just say go read it. Then I read Waiting for Tom Hanks by Carrie Winfrey. This was super, super, super cute. I think I enjoyed it more in the moment than I do now later on, kind of like with Starling, but I would recommend it. It's super fun, cute, cozy. It's just like a very goofy, silly little romance. And then I read Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune, which I would not recommend. That's it. Moving on to June, I started it with The Love Wager by Lynn Painter. I love Lynn Painter. This was my first adult romance of hers and I devoured it. Would recommend for sure. Then I moved on to a romance book called Forgive or Forget Me by Anne Einerson. This was my first book by this author and I really, really loved it. It was sort of similar to Love and Other Words and it broke my heart, but it was also just so beautiful. I would recommend anything by her. And then we moved on to the rest of my Shatter Me phase. So I read Fracture Me and Unravel Me, the novella and the second book. Here's Unravel Me. I would recommend both of these. And then I read Ignite Me, which I absolutely would recommend. Then I read Shadow Me and Restore Me. And then I read Defy Me and Reveal Me and Imagine Me, Believe Me. I read the whole series, okay? I flew through them in a little over a week and I was completely obsessed. Would recommend. Okay, so the camera stopped recording and I don't know where it stopped, which is just so awesome. I read all of these during my birthday week and just literally loved them so much. Like I literally spent my birthday reading Shatter Me and I love the series. I would recommend. It was so much fun to read. And then I read It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This was my first book by hers and honestly I would not recommend it. I felt like it was just very overhyped. The writing was not my favorite thing. Then I read Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter. This is the interconnected standalone to The Love Wager. I liked this one a lot, not as much as The Love Wager, but I did still really love it and I would recommend. And then I read What Happens After Midnight by K.L. Walther. I think this one was a lot of fun. If you're really into YA, I would recommend, but it was definitely not as good as her first book, unfortunately. And then I read a book that I would absolutely recommend. I read The Two of Us by Taylor Torres. I loved this book so much. It was so beautiful. It was, again, the type of story like Love in Other Words, and I just ate it up. So I would recommend that. And then we moved into July. So in July, I started with The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This was part of a 24-hour reading challenge that I did, and I loved this book. It was probably my second favorite Riley Sager book. Could not recommend enough. And then another book I loved, I read The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. So freaking cute. It's like The Bachelor, but with an author. Need I say more? And then I moved on to my first Ali Hazelwood book. I read The Love Hypothesis. This one was cute. Not my favorite thing ever, but you know, if you're into those like really cute popular romances, go for it. Give it a shot. And then I read What I Carry by Jennifer Longo. This is a really emotional YA romance about a girl coming of age in the foster system, and it was just beautiful. I would recommend 100%. I thought it was so, so good. Then I read the coveted Fourth Wing that everybody read, and I enjoyed it. Thought it was fun. Not my favorite thing ever, but you know, it was a good time. And then I moved on to Safe Harbor by Kay Cinco, which I loved so much. One of my favorite books of the year. I could not recommend it enough. It's a YA book set in the summer about first love, first heartbreak, coming of age, just beautiful. Then I read Song of Achilles, which again, I would recommend if you haven't read it yet. It is so hyped up for good reason. I loved this book with my whole heart. And then I ended that month with Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. Did not love. Would not recommend that one, unfortunately. I'm so sorry. It just did not work for me. Moving on to August, this was definitely when the amount of books I read in the month started to taper down. I started August with People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This was my first time reading this. I loved it. Would recommend. And then I moved on to Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Definitely my least favorite book of hers I've read so far, but I still thought it was really, really good. I loved like the summer vibes. I would recommend that one as well. And then I read A Court of Thorns and Roses for the first time. I know I'm really late to the game. I did really enjoy this one. I think this one was my favorite in the series so far, so I would recommend it. As far as continuing the series, you'll hear from me in a minute. And then I read Same Time Next Summer by Annabelle Monaghan. This one was not my favorite. I would not recommend it because I think there are other books that do what this one did better. And then I read Unnecessary Drama by Nina Kenwood. All I'm gonna say for this one is I would not recommend it. I don't want to get into it. And then I finished this trilogy by reading A Conjuring of Light, and I struggled to get through it. You've heard my thoughts already. I wouldn't recommend this one unless you're really into fantasy. Then we move on to September. I started it with Six of Crows. I adored this so much, and then I actually immediately after read Crooked Kingdom. Would recommend both of these. They are some of my favorite books. I just love them so much. And then I read More Than Just Us by my friend Allie. This book was so good. It's coming out in March, and I need everybody to read it because it is one of the best things ever. Literally so, so, so good. And then I ended September with A Court of Mist and Fury. I did not like this book at all. I'm so sorry. Not a fan. I know people love this book, but I just didn't. Then we move on to October, which was actually a really good reading month for me. I started it with The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I love this book so much. I absolutely would recommend it to anyone and everyone. It is incredible. Then I read Bossy Pants by Tina Fey, which if you're a fan of Tina Fey, I would definitely recommend. It was super funny, as she tends to be, you know, so it was really good. Then I read The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. Oh my goodness, this was so good. I love Grady Hendrix. I feel like that's pretty obvious, and I would definitely recommend that if you're a horror fan or just a mystery thriller fan, or if you're a Grady Hendrix fan, yeah. Then I read My Roommate is a Vampire, which I expected to hate, but I actually really enjoyed. I would recommend this one, especially for Halloween. Just be expecting to be kind of disappointed by the ending. And then I read one of the short stories out of here. I read Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption because I love the movie, and honestly, I thought this was so good. I would recommend it, especially if you like Shawshank Redemption. It just was like another version of the movie. It was like very similar, but I really liked it. Then I read Psyche and Eros by Luna McNamara. I would recommend this if you're into Greek mythology, but not if you're like a super fan of it, because it was not super accurate, I think. Or it was, but it was just kind of different, I think. And then I read The Maidens by Alex Michaelides, and I personally love this. I feel like not many people do, but I was obsessed with it. And then I ended October with The Last Word by Taylor Adams. One of my favorite books of 2023. Could not recommend it enough. Please go read it. I literally just got called into work, so I'm going to hurry up and finish this. The next thing I read, I kind of started on the last day of October, finished in November. I read The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling. Not my favorite, but I would recommend it for Halloween because it's really cute. And then I read If You Give a Grump a Holiday Wish List by Anne Einerson. This was an ARC, and it was just a really cute, short Christmas novella. I had a lot of fun with it. I would recommend if you're not going to judge it too hard, just because Christmas books are typically really cheesy. Then I read Iron Flame. No, just don't read it. Then I finally read The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. Loved it with my whole heart. Definitely recommend. Just like, so cute. So freaking cute. I just love Sarah Adams so much. And then I ended my November with A Court of Wings and Ruin. I listened to the audiobook of this and I did not love it, but I definitely enjoyed it more than I did Asimov, so there's that. And finally we get to December. I started it with a novella. I read A Risk Worth Taking by Jessica Joyce, and I thought this was so cute. It was a really short Christmas novella and I ate it up. I devoured it. Definitely recommend that one. Then I reread Love in Other Words. I was annotating it for my friend. Really loved again. I also reread Yours Truly. I don't know where it went. I reread that one, loved it just as much the second time. Then I read The 12 Days of Christmas by Jenny Bayliss. This was really cute as far as Christmas books go. I would recommend it if you like Christmas books, but it's definitely not the best one I've read. Then I read This Winter by Alice Oseman. This is a Nick and Charlie Heartstopper novella. I actually read this for the second time this year and I just loved it so much. I love Alice Oseman. I love Heartstopper so much. Then I read all the Heartstopper books to end my year, including the brand new one that I was sent. Thank you so much, Bessie Lucy. I just love Heartstopper so much. This was the most perfect way to end my year because I try to reread the books every year. I hadn't yet in 2023 and I figured what better way to end the year. So that's how I ended it. And I love them all so much. Of course I recommend Heartstopper. They're just my favorite. I love them so much. So woo, that was a lot. Those were all the books that I read in 2023, how I felt about them in few words. I would love to hear your guys' favorite books of the year, or kind of like if you found any new favorites, any that you hated. I would just love to hear anything because I think it's so fun to kind of look at the year in review and see what you read. So that was my video today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to be friends, all of my socials will be linked down below as always. And thank you so much for watching. I love you guys so much and I will see you in the next one.